Hi, everybody. Welcome to the American Library in Paris. I'm Rachel Donadio. I'm the curator of cultural programs here. How many of you have never been to the library before? Well, welcome, all of you. I won't ask who in this room has a security clearance. We are the largest English language lending library on the European continent, and it is a pleasure to be here tonight to have a rare glimpse behind the scenes of the CIA with Tim Weiner in conversation with Pierre Haski. Pierre and Tim were going to be in conversation for about 45 minutes, and then we will open it up to questions from you in the audience. We are joined tonight by Pierre and Tim. I'm going to just introduce them. Tim Weiner has won the Pulitzer Prize for his reporting on American national security and the National Book Award for Legacy of Ashes, The History of the CIA. At the New York Times, he covered the CIA in Washington and conflicts in Afghanistan, Pakistan, and many other nations. Legacy of Ashes was acclaimed as one of the year's best books by the New York Times, The Economist, The Washington Post, Time, and many other publications. His new book, The Mission, The CIA in the 21st Century, which he will talk about this evening, was ranked number 3 on the New York Times bestseller list upon its publication. He lives in Brooklyn with his wife, Kate Doyle, an expert in human rights and freedom of information. Please give Tim a big round of applause. And he will be in conversation tonight with none other than Pierre Haski, who has worked as a journalist for more than 5 decades, first at Agence France Presse and later at the French daily Libération. He was a foreign correspondent posted in Johannesburg, Jerusalem, and Beijing. In 2007, he co-founded the news website rue89.com. He has a daily geopolitics column on France Inter, France's #1 radio station. Since 2017, he has been president of Reporters Sans Frontières, RSF, of Paris-based international NGO. He is the author of several books as well as documentaries for Arte, including L'Amérique en guerre, America at War, from this year. So a big round of applause for the two speakers. Take it away.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you, Rachel, for the introduction, and hi, Tim. This is an amazing book, I must say. It's a gold mine of information. It's a jump into a world that we'd rather not know, to be honest, because it's scary. It's scary not because people are fighting the enemy or because they are taking risks in wars or dangerous situations, but it's scary for political reasons. Because I think for me the main, the wildest and richest part of the book is the relationship between the political leadership and the CIA, and that's scary for very obvious reasons when you look at what's going on in the US at the moment. But it's not only limited to Donald Trump, although he features in the book, obviously. But it's a permanent feature with all presidents that you cover in those 25 years of the first quarter of the 21st century. And there are, for me, 2 moments which and I would like you to react to that, which say a lot about this political link between those who have been elected to rule and the commander-in-chief, as you say in the US, and the CIA and the situations of war that have been a constant feature. The first one is when Paul Bremer in Iraq who was the governor or whatever his title was, viceroy of Iraq, makes that decision to dissolve the Ba'ath Party of Saddam Hussein and the Iraqi National Army. And as one of your interlocutors say, we made 50,000 enemies with one stroke of the pen. Yeah, and that decision obviously led to the birth of Daesh, of ISIS, and even in Paris, we're going to commemorate in a few days the 10th anniversary of the worst terrorist attack that we experienced on French soil, which was the Bataclan and all the cafes and restaurants in 2015. That's a direct connection to that decision. But Paul Bremer calls George W. Bush before signing and for instructions, for clearance, for whatever. And Bush tells him, "Oh, you're there, you know better." You know, that's the commander-in-chief. And this is only one example of this irresponsibility that went all along from 9/11 to, in a way, to the end of those two endless wars. And the second moment, which I found also fascinating, is Barack Obama, when he knows all the Russian cyber theft of all the data that he will use, that Russia will use in the following month and so on, and he decides to do nothing. And you say he fails at that moment to take action and to call it for what it is. And in those two circumstances, you have you wonder, you know, what is at stake between the political leadership and the CIA, how it works, and how bad leadership leads to world disasters when you are the #1 superpower.
When you consider the record of George W. Bush and his misuse, and abuse of the CIA, you recognize that ideology is the enemy of intelligence, in both senses of the word intelligence. If you're an ideologue, you don't need intelligence. Your mind is made up. You don't want to be confused with facts. And as one of the CIA officers in this book, quite a character named Luis Rueda, observes, he said, and I quote, "They," meaning the Bush people, "they would have gone to war in Iraq if Saddam only had a rubber band and a paperclip to put your eye out. The decision had been taken 6 days after 9/11. And, you know, unfortunately for the CIA, the United States Senate and its Committee on Intelligence sends a fax over to the CIA in September 2002 and said, "Do you have any idea about Saddam's weapons of mass destruction programs?" The fax rattles in on a Saturday afternoon, and a clerk wearing a hijab brings it over to, you know, the chief intelligence analyst working that question, and they want the report in 6 weeks. I'm sorry, they want the report in 3 weeks. Normally, an estimate like this takes 6 months or a year. And the CIA is too ashamed to admit that it doesn't know anything about Saddam Hussein's weapons of mass destruction programs. It doesn't have any spies in Baghdad. The last CIA officers in Baghdad were ejected along with the United Nations weapons inspectors in 1998. They were using the UN for cover, which is also a bad idea. And they just don't know. And they realize that the train has left the station. They're going to war no matter what the reporting says. And unfortunately, the analysts in charge of this worked with the opposite of the scientific method. They started with a thesis, threw out all the evidence that didn't confirm it, and then presented their hypothesis. Bush abused the CIA in ways no previous president had imagined. The CIA was not created to be a lethal paramilitary force, no matter what you may see in the movies. The CIA was not created to run secret prisons and torture people within them. The CIA was created for espionage. That is the mission of the CIA. That is its unique function. And you know, unfortunately, we've only been at this since 1947. The French have been at it since Cardinal Richelieu, I imagine, and the Russians have been at it since Peter the Great, and the British since Queen Elizabeth I, and the Chinese since Sun Tzu wrote The Art of War 26 centuries ago. We're amateurs, really. Most of us. Most of them. In the second instance you speak of, the problem was this. It's October 2016. The CIA and latterly the FBI have detected that there is a Russian political warfare operation that is running rampant in the United States, greatly assisted by Julian Assange of WikiLeaks, that aims to rub salt in the open political wounds of the American body politic, denigrate Hillary Clinton, and support Donald Trump, who is Putin's chosen candidate. And all spring and summer, the CIA has been watching this happening like a cow watching a train go by. It sees something, but it doesn't know what it is. The FBI is also baffled. But by 6 weeks before the presidential election of 2016, they go, holy shit. We've never seen anything like this before. And Obama decides whether or not to go public with this, to say Vladimir Putin is trying to elect Donald Trump. And he says he won't do it. He doesn't want to put his thumb on the scale of the election. I think that was cowardice. Well, the first transformation of the CIA in the 21st century comes when it becomes a counterterrorism army. The second transformation happens just after the 2016 election in the spring of 2017, and that is the decision to pay the Russians back. We can talk about that.
But on this issue of policymakers, there's a quote from a top CIA officer, Doug Wise, that I found in the book, which I found so vivid with today's situation. And I give it this quote: "The existential danger to the nation is when the policymaker corrupts the role of the intelligence agencies, which is to provide unbiased and apolitical intelligence to inform policy." And that's, it seems to me, what is a constant feature of that 25 years is that policymakers are corrupting the role of the CIA and make it a political tool.
Because they're ideologues. And because they don't really understand what the CIA can and cannot do for them. Okay? Bush wanted it to, and he said this, to go out and kill every terrorist in the world. Sorry, we can't do that. But we can try, Mr. President. Obama decided it was better to incinerate America's enemies than incarcerate them. So he set the CIA out on the drone war campaign, realizing 3 or 4 years afterwards that the CIA and the American military were killing so many civilians that they were making more enemies than they were killing. And then he ramped it down. Trump has been on a jihad against the CIA and the FBI ever since they fingered him and his team. They identified and then told the public about it after the election that Team Trump and Team Putin were playing together. And that the Russians had, in fact, launched the most successful covert operation since the Trojan horse. Through concerted acts of political warfare, they helped skew the election. We'll never know if they changed 10,000 votes or 1 million, but they changed votes through their operation. There's no question. So ever since Trump was confronted with these facts, he has worked assiduously to destroy the CIA. And he's really gone at it since he returned to power in January.
You say in the book that he considers the CIA as the capital of the deep state. But you also say
there is no deep state.
I was going to say, you also write that there's no deep state. So how are you so sure?
Pierre,
I'm not American.
I've been at this for 38 years. Okay, my bullshit meter is quite sensitive. When someone says deep state, it goes, There's no deep state. It's a paranoid fantasy.
But half of the Americans believe there is a deep state.
That says something about half of Americans. So what Trump has done since retaking power in January is, well, let me give you the biggest picture. Okay. The American Secretary of State, Dean Acheson, who served under Harry Truman, wrote a book, marvelous book, called Present at the Creation, in which he describes the construction of the architectures of American national security that were erected after World War II, including the Department of Defense, which is not the Department of War, no matter what the president says, the CIA, NATO, an architecture created to defend the United States and its allies against, among other things, Russian imperialism. We are now present at the destruction. Donald Trump has swung a wrecking ball at that architecture. And it started at the CIA when he installed one of his favorite acolytes, a man named John Ratcliffe, as the head of the CIA. Ratcliffe had come to Trump's attention during Trump's first impeachment for extorting Ukraine by going as a congressman on Fox News and really rousing the rabble against the investigation and against Trump, and for Trump. And Trump said, I like this guy. And he put him in the last 8 months of his first administration as the director of national intelligence with his right-hand man, Kash Patel. These men are now running the CIA and the FBI and systematically destroying them. A brief synopsis of what Ratcliffe has done since coming to the CIA on 23rd January. He has summarily fired dozens and dozens of senior CIA officers, including the man who's featured in this book, Tom Sylvester, who was the top spy, the chief of the clandestine service, by forcing them to submit to loyalty tests. They have to answer some questions. Who did you vote for in the previous November? What do you think of the January 6th insurrection? And who really won the election in 2020? Okay, it's an ideological purge, and the same thing is happening at the FBI. And I don't want to compare these two regimes because that would be an invidious comparison. But do recall that in Pol Pot's Cambodia, people were purged because they wore glasses, because they could read. These are the people who can read. Then he summarily fired everyone the CIA had hired to become spies, intelligence officers, in 2023 and 2024 because they were Biden hires. You're out. You're on the street. Most of these people were training up to work on China. He then sent their true first names and their true first initials in an unclassified email to the White House and Elon Musk. I assure you that the Chinese can read the unclassified email systems of the White House. Then, this is all in the first couple of days of his administration. He then abolished the CIA's long-standing, 40-odd years old policy for diversity in hiring. Why does the CIA have a policy of diversity in hiring when it comes to hiring CIA operations officers? Is the CIA woke? No. Because sending an all-white cadre of CIA operations officers to spy in China or Pakistan or the Sudan is really terrible tradecraft. That's gone. The same thing is happening at the FBI, where Kash Patel, another MAGA acolyte, is dismantling the national security and intelligence divisions of the FBI. The net effect of this is to increase dramatically the risks of a catastrophic systemic intelligence failure. And we know what that looks like.
Now, the $10 million question is the relationship between Trump and Russia, because you don't. Sorry, the relationship between Trump and Russia. It appears so many times in the book. It's some facts are known, some are not known. But what's your deep feeling and conclusion about what is at stake between those two? Between Putin
There's a
and
very specific term in the lexicon of the CIA for what Trump was during his first administration. That phrase is agent of influence. An agent of influence is someone with political power who deliberately advances the foreign policies of a hostile power. That shoe fits. Now wait. There's more. People have wondered about this for a decade. Okay, is Trump Putin's asset? Did the KGB recruit him when he first went to Moscow in 1987? A rich, corrupt hotel developer trying to build a hotel with the Soviet government across from Red Square, a man with a pronounced taste for Slavic women who was cheating on his first wife. If the KGB did not target him on that first trip in 1987, they would be guilty of criminal negligence, which is not out of the question. But we know the answer now. He's not Putin's asset. He has been Putin's ally. And we knew this for certain on February 24th, when the United States, at Trump's command, voted with Russia, Iran, and North Korea against a United Nations resolution condemning the Russian invasion on its third anniversary. Now imagine that you are a CIA officer, and there are hundreds, if not several thousands of them, who has spent every waking moment since 2014 trying to work for the survival of Ukraine or to oppose Russian imperialism in Europe. Can you imagine what a head-spinning, gut-wrenching experience? I mean, one of them talked to me a few days later and said, I want to throw up. The President of the United States has gone over to the other side. Now, Trump, since the fateful meeting in Alaska, has said, well, Vladimir Putin lied to me. Oh, really? Quel horror! Trump has not authorized one bullet for Ukraine. He is cutting off military aid to the nations of NATO. Vladimir Putin is waging a hybrid warfare attack throughout Europe. Sabotage, subversion, assassination. If he is allowed to keep 1 hectare of Ukraine, he's not going to stop there. So this is a danger too.
You use another word in the book, which is useful idiot. So that's different from.
It's a Russian term.
Yeah, sure. But
Anybody
but
here
it's
speak Russian?
But it's different from.
Polsny Doraki. Useful idiot.
But that's different from being an asset or an ally. It's just being.
It's much
abused.
closer to agent of influence.
Talking about Ukraine, I must say I learned in details in the book something I didn't know is how, I mean, we knew that the U.S. Intelligence had information about the preparation for the invasion in February 2022, but the amount of knowledge they had, which you reveal, and the trip by Bill Burns, I think, to Moscow, is quite staggering. Can you tell us about that? Because that's something that we don't know all the details about.
When I learned, by reading the New York Times, that the CIA had stolen Vladimir Putin's war plans for Ukraine, including the deception operations that he was going to use, fake Ukrainian attacks on Russians, the whole plan, all of it. I said, wow. The CIA had been trying to penetrate the Kremlin since 1947, and its record was unblemished by success up until this moment. And I thought, wow, this is something new. I think I have to write another book about the CIA. And I put aside the book I was writing, I wanted to know how they did it. And this is the story of how they did it. In the immediate aftermath of the Russian attack on our democracy, in the spring of 2017, there was a new chief of spies at the CIA. And his name is Tomas Rakusan. Tom Rakusan is Czech. His parents were Czech. His roots are Czech. He was 9 years old when Soviet tanks rolled into Czechoslovakia to crush the Prague Spring in 1968. His feelings about the Russians are deep. He called in all the top people from the Directorate of Operations, scores of them. Most of these people had been doing counterterrorism around the clock for 15 years. And he said to them, I want you to take the talents that you have developed in targeting terrorists, and parenthetically, by targeting, I don't mean putting warheads on foreheads. I mean identifying them. Who are they? Who are they when they're at home? What is their true name? Who do they love? Who do they hate? What is the pattern of their life? With the goal of recruiting them to be agents for the CIA. Recruited foreign agents. A guy who works for the CIA and gets a U.S. Treasury check is a CIA officer. The foreigner he recruits is an agent of the CIA. And Rakusan said to his people, I don't care if you've never been in Moscow. I don't care if you don't speak Russian. I want you to recruit Russian spies. I want you to recruit Russian diplomats. I want you to recruit Russian oligarchs. Go to it. And the result, 4 years later, was the theft of Vladimir Putin's war plans from out of the Kremlin. It's a great story. And it reminded me that the mission of the CIA is espionage. Not running secret prisons, not killing people. Espionage. And that espionage is the essence of the CIA's mission, and recruiting foreign agents is the quintessence of that mission. Now, once upon a time, if a Russian or an Iranian or a North Korean was targeted for recruitment by the CIA, people do this for a lot of reasons. Okay. Revenge. Cash. The CIA has a lot of money. A one-way ticket to the United States. or sometimes the best of them, want to change the world around them and think that by allying themselves with the CIA and with the United States, that might help. Once upon a time, it was easier to recruit them because the United States could say with a straight face, we stand for liberty and democracy. We can't say that anymore. The lights in the shining city of the hill are going out. Recruitment is much harder now. And this, combined with the destruction of expertise and experience at CIA, increases the danger of unpleasant surprise.
But coming back on that information that the CIA had and which it passed on to the president, Joe Biden at that time, I'm a little bit surprised by the fact that the first reaction is to go and see Putin and confront him with the fact and say, you shouldn't do it.
Well, that was the director of the CIA, William J. Burns. Burns knew Putin very well. He had been the American ambassador to Moscow. He knew Putin extremely well. And, Burns, if you don't know him, read this book. He's an extraordinary person. Read the book anyway. But he's an extraordinary person. He is
you seem to like him.
Universally acknowledged to be the greatest American diplomat of his generation. He had been Deputy Secretary of State, ambassador to Russia, ambassador to Jordan, speaks Russian, speaks Arabic. And what Burns was doing is practicing something very rare in the American experience, intelligence diplomacy. And, he wasn't going to Moscow expecting Putin to sing Kumbaya. But he figured it was worth a try. And he also said, we've stolen this incredible tranche of secrets. Let's tell the world. That is not normally the response of the CIA when they steal really neat secrets. Let's tell the world. And they did. And of course, the first reaction of the French and the Germans and the nations of NATO was,
here you are again.
Aren't you the people that told us Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction 18 years ago? The stench of that still lingered in the air. But, the CIA was right. And the fact that they were proven right, I think, had an immediate, electrifying, galvanizing effect on the nations of Europe, which have tried, despite the dysfunction of some of their governments, nothing personal.
No one will protest.
To support Ukraine. Trump has not authorized one bullet for Ukraine. Trump is cutting off military support for the nations of NATO. To get back to your $64,000 question, if he were a Russian agent, would he behave any differently?
Yeah, sure. But, so what do you think are going to be the consequences of him destroying the CIA or the security architecture, as you've mentioned?
Well, of course. I now want to invoke the spirit of the great poet and songwriter Leonard Cohen. Are you familiar with his work? I will quote him. You want it darker? The immediate effect of the destruction of the national security apparatus of the United States, which is happening every day, is, as I have said, increasing the risk of a surprise attack, of an unforeseen attack. It's not going to look like the last attack, in all likelihood. It could be Putin turning up the heat until all of Europe is the frog in the saucepan, as the water begins to boil and thinking, this is a nice hot bath. until it's dead. But let's say it's an attack on the United States at home or abroad. What do you think Donald Trump would do if the United States were attacked at home or abroad? Well, he's already partway down the road to declaring martial law. He would certainly declare martial law. And my fear is that he would cancel the next election and truly rule as a dictator. That would be a foreseen consequence of his destruction of the American national security apparatus. And of course, why is he doing this? Because the CIA and the FBI fingered him for his strange alliance with Vladimir Putin. Or as he calls it, the Russia hoax.
Another aspect, I'm sure some of the questions will come back to that current situation. Another aspect which I found, you go very deep into it, is obviously the CIA going into the black prisons, the torture, destroying the evidence of it, and all the controversy about admitting it publicly. That's also a fascinating part, because you have a huge part of the security system that goes wild and becomes what have I said?
The security system didn't go wild.
Who went wild?
The President of the United States authorized
Sure.
the CIA, instructed the CIA to build the secret prison and authorized them to torture prisoners in it. You know, this takes a long time to understand. That the CIA is an executor of American foreign policy.
In the book, you hint that a lot of it was not known to the executive branch.
A lot of
the secret war, or the excesses of the secret wars.
Bush signed a secret order authorizing.
Sure, but you know, it seems that a lot of it was hidden from the White House. No, is that an illusion?
Okay, this is very instructive. Okay, the CIA cannot conduct covert action without the president's signature. And this was a reform instituted after the Church Committee hearings of 50 years ago. For those of you who were not alive, the fall of Richard Nixon. I owe my entire journalism career to Richard Nixon, parenthetically. The fall of Richard Nixon precipitated a season of inquiry in the Senate that began to look into what the CIA and the FBI had been doing since the end of World War II. And at the beginning of these hearings, the senator conducting the inquiry, leading it, was a man named Frank Church, known as the Church Committee hearings. And at the beginning, before they got started, Church said, "I believe the CIA has been a rogue elephant, trampling people and nations." At the end of the inquiry, 18 months later, it became clear to Senator Church, although not perhaps clear to Americans, that when the elephant trampled peoples and nations, it wasn't the elephant's fault. It was the fault of the mahout, of the elephant driver, and the elephant driver was the President of the United States. I mean, do you really think that a couple of CIA officers were sitting around Miami in 1960 on their second or third martini, and one of them said, "Hey, I got a great idea. Let's go kill Fidel Castro"? That didn't happen. Presidents Eisenhower and Kennedy, and President Kennedy's brother Bobby, wanted that job done.
If I may continue to contradict you. No, there's one very interesting aspect, is also the human dimension. I mean,
Always.
you describe a lot the careers, the background, the training, the experiences of different officers who have played a key part in all that history. And from what I understand from your book, they don't have all the same approach to torture, to the way of extracting information from suspect prisoners or killing civilians or all that. And so there is some room to maneuver between the executive order and the way it's implemented in the field.
You know, one reason I write these books, other than it's actually a great pleasure doing the reporting and writing of my histories of the CIA, is that, you know, we're Americans. We're the United States of amnesia. The CIA doesn't know its own history. If the CIA had bothered to look into the origins of the waterboard, of the sleep deprivation, and the other tortures it inflicted on prisoners, they would have seen that where did they learn these techniques? They got them from the Navy and the Air Force, who trained pilots to not succumb to torture by torturing them, waterboarding them, depriving them of sleep in special training courses. Where did the Air Force and the Navy get this knowledge? From the experience of downed American pilots who were tortured by the Vietnamese in Hanoi during the war in Vietnam. Why were the North Vietnamese torturing them? It wasn't for intelligence. They didn't know when the next bombing run was coming. They were torturing them to extract false confessions for propaganda, for lies. The torture did not create intelligence that blazed the path to Osama bin Laden's hideout in Abbottabad. It was the recruitment by the CIA stations in Islamabad and Kabul of al-Qaeda forces.
If we go a little bit further, there's also the French-Algerian War, supposed to have been a source of inspiration.
Yeah. Torture doesn't work. This we know now.
Time is flying. Maybe we should go to questions, because I'm sure there are a lot. So, you were very quick.
Please raise your hands high and I'll bring you the microphone.
And please state your question in the form of a question.
Yes, thank you. So here's my question. There's one thing I don't understand about your timeline. So you said that the CIA, thanks to its new leader, starting in spring of 2017, started recruiting Russian agents. But that's under Trump's administration, and Trump was certainly not inclined to want to investigate Russia. And you also said that the CIA won't act without the authority of the president. So square that circle for me, please.
The CIA requires presidential authorization for covert action. Espionage is not covert action, and I guarantee you that the director of the CIA in this time period didn't tell Trump a mumbling word about it.
Yes, in the middle. Okay, next.
Thank you, first of all. Thank you for your very optimistic outlook. I would like to ask, you mentioned the youth of the United States, the youth of the CIA as an agency, and you mentioned its misuse, its, as you said, the amnesia of the agency. I wonder, is the problem in the misuse of the CIA, apart from the particular kinks of His Excellency, the President of the United States, the fact that perhaps it hasn't had the time, unlike the French secret services, the Russians, the British, to develop the customs of an intelligence agency, or even the Chinese? Has it not had the time to build, or has it not remembered the experiences it has had to be an intelligence gathering agency?
When I say the CIA doesn't know its own history, I mean it. I mentioned Luis Rueda. a CI officer of 30 years experience who was charged with drawing up a plan to penetrate Saddam's military and intelligence services before the American invasion. Congratulations, Luis, his boss said to him, you're the new chief of the Iraq Operations Group. So when I talk about a record unblemished by success, the CIA tried to overthrow Saddam Hussein in the 1990s, and it got a lot of recruited Iraqi agents killed and accomplished nothing. So Luis went to look for the classified histories of the Iraq Operations Group. No one could find them. Where'd they go? They were not to be found. This goes a long way to explaining, I think, patterns of failure in covert action. People can't learn from the past.
There's a gentleman in the middle.
Thank you for joining us tonight. Obviously, lots of consequences for people in the United States, but I'm wondering more about the consequences for our intelligence services in the cooperation that they see from other intelligence services. In particular, I look towards the British intelligence after the revelations of the Cambridge Five. Do you see something like that coming our way?
The CIA depends to a truly remarkable degree on its liaisons with foreign intelligence services. More than 60 of them, including from nations that you would not ever think of as American allies. It relies on them. Why? Because they have the languages and the culture and the country knowledge to help the CIA understand the world. You know, the CIA is not the Pentagon. The people who are actually working on operations and analysis full-time, maybe 12, 13,000 people. Okay, the size of an army platoon, an army division. These relationships depend on trust. The person overseeing American intelligence at this point in the Directorate of National Intelligence, which was established after 9/11, so everybody could connect the dots, right, is a woman named Tulsi Gabbard. You're familiar with Tulsi Gabbard? Tulsi Gabbard is a Putin apologist, a conspiracy theorist, and a crackpot. If you were the head of La Piscine, I don't know what they call it now, the French intelligence service. Okay, I've forgotten. Or the BND in Germany, or MI6. Would you trust Tulsi Gabbard with a secret? This is another factor playing into, let's call it what Bill Burns, the former CIA director, calls it. This is his phrase, the strategic self-immolation of American national security. I would now like to quote or paraphrase Hannah Arendt, who wrote in her 1951 book, The Origins of Totalitarianism. Totalitarianism in power inevitably replaces first-rate minds with those crackpots and fools whose only virtue is their fealty to the totalitarian.
We have a question in the front.
Yes.
So you just brought up Tulsi Gabbard, and what I'm in the process of reading the book, and I thought that the biggest surprise was the Condi Rice surprise about her not moving the information up the food chain, and so
This is in the run-up to the war.
run-up to the war, and so that was shocking.
Well, in the run-up to 9/11.
9/11.
Yeah.
Actually, okay. And so now in my mind, I was just before you said her name, I was going to say, and now we have somebody like Tulsi Gabbard, so she's not going to push this up the food chain if somebody gives her something that there's going to be some kind of an attack. Is like, what do you think? I mean, is there anybody who's working along those lines in that government who can actually do something? Or, I mean, because Condi Rice she's a serious person.
I think it's a Russia hand. Wasn't too well versed on the Middle East. So your question is there someone in the government of the United States who will sound the alarm?
Is this reversible?
It's a different question. And to your question, I will answer by quoting, this may be apocryphal. Apparently Ho Chi Minh was once asked what he thought of the French Revolution, and he said, it's too early to tell.
It's Zhou Enlai.
Chow? Oh, okay, my bad. Thank you, Pierre. In answer to your question, one of the first people who ever schooled me about the CIA was Richard Helms, who was its director from 1966 to 73 under Presidents Johnson and Nixon. And in this context of warning, Helms said, it's not enough to ring the bell. You have to make sure the other person hears it. And the other person is Donald Trump. I'm sorry I can't console you on this matter.
But what you describe in the
Was
book...
it really Chow?
Yes, I swear. I'm sure. I spent 5 years.
We'll publish a correction tomorrow.
I spent 5 years in China. That's and in the book you describe how Bush was not ready to hear before 9/11. So that's exactly what you just said, and they had not the direct information, but the hint that something big was coming, and there was no one on top to listen.
That is the quintessence of the tragedy of 9/11.
Okay, yeah, here and then in the back.
Hi, I wanted to ask a sort of, I don't know, like a broader question, which is, with all of the research that you've done, with all of the information you have access to, how do you feel sort of overall about the existence of these clandestine organizations in the United States? And do you believe that there is any potential for them to have sort of efficacy and value in the future?
We know from our experience that a secret intelligence service in the hands of a lawless president is a very dangerous thing. From 1967 until 1973, Presidents Johnson and Nixon ordered the CIA to spy on Americans in direct violation of its charter. The CIA has no police powers in the United States because Harry Truman said at the time of its creation, I don't want a Gestapo, quote unquote. Why did Presidents Johnson and Nixon order the CIA to spy on Americans? To discover the secret sources of funding from Moscow and Beijing that were fueling the anti-war and civil rights movements. Ce n'existe pas. There was no such thing. And the discovery of this, which of course goes to Seymour Hersh, then of the New York Times, uncovered this and published it in 1974 in December. And that's what directly led to the Church Committee hearings. What does this tell us about the present situation? The Supreme Court ruled last year that a president cannot be investigated or prosecuted for crimes committed in office. 6-2-3. And in dissent, Justice Sonia Sotomayor wrote, if the President of the United States determined to assassinate a political enemy, under this ruling, there is a fair chance that he could get away with it. The President is now a king. Should Donald Trump decide to misuse or abuse the CIA in any one of a number of ways that his predecessors did, spying on Americans, fomenting a coup against a democratically constituted government abroad, putting weapons in the hands of putative American allies who then turn on the United States. Ain't a damn thing that the courts can do about it. The only thing to do is to vote the bastards out.
We have time for one more question here.
Oh.
Sorry.
Thank you. If it was up to you, what would you have the CIA focus on and spend its money on, and what results would you want to be achieved?
I'm just a journalist. But, I mean, the most pressing need right now is intelligence on the Kremlin and what Vladimir Putin's intentions are for recreating the Russian Empire. The second most important thing, I think, would be a concerted effort by the CIA and the FBI to mount counterintelligence defenses against China. The Chinese have systematically stolen the personnel records of everybody who works for the United States government, including everyone who works for the intelligence community, including those people's security clearance files, which contain a treasure trove of personal information, including passport photo, biometric photos, fingerprint files. The Chinese then took that information, cross-indexed it with biometric data they have stolen from the world's airports, gave it to Alibaba to crunch. And today, 10 years later, if you are a CIA officer, they've also penetrated all the US telecoms, the unclassified email systems of the entire US government. Today, if you are a CIA officer arriving to take up a post, not just in Beijing, but in Ouagadougou, okay, you are likely to be met by a Chinese intelligence officer at the luggage carousel who says, "Hello, Joe. I know who you are. Have a nice day." This is not good for the future of espionage, and is another factor in the present crisis.
Thank you. Can we have a round of applause or a... Thank you. We need a round of applause. We need a group hug. We need to let this all land. Thank you.
Some of you may need a drink after
Yeah,
that.
that too. Thank you so much for this extremely illuminating and very sobering conversation. Thank you, Pierre, for your excellent questions. Thank all of you for coming tonight. Books will be for sale outside, which Tim will be signing in English or in French, thanks to our partners Smith & Son and Tom Set. I want to point out some upcoming events. We have some things on visual art to take the edge off the current historical moment. On Wednesday, the 15th of October, we have curator Lynn Gumpert and Sophie Eloy, who are going to explore the legacy of pioneering art dealer Bert Veil and give us a behind-the-scenes look at the current exhibition at the Orangerie. And on Tuesday, October 28th, join novelist R.O. Kwan and visual artist Chloe Kenum for a cross-disciplinary bilingual conversation on the tangled questions of ownership and origin in art. The American Library in Paris is an independent, non-profit organization. So if you are not a donor, please think of becoming one so we can continue programming and all the other great things we do here at the library. Thank you so much for coming. Thanks you guys again, and have a good evening.